Good. Okay, well, we can go ahead and get started. Thank you for coming. This is like a small group, but good enough that I'm not, I was imagining, oh, there's just 2 people in here. What kind of conversation will we have? So, yeah, thank you for coming. My name's Aubrey Hoeppner. I work with Douglas Shaw & Associates as the Vice President of Client Services. And at Douglas Shaw & Associates, we are primarily a direct response marketing firm. So we handle the mailing program, so appeals and newsletters going out, as well as digital fundraising, some website support as well, but really we focus on the communications that are going directly to someone with a fundraising ask or a stewardship support to the donors. And we really care, come on and sit down. We really care about, if you want to sit here, I can switch over. Oh, that's perfect. We really care about helping ministries to build a sustainable base of support. So our focus is not so much on getting large gifts from the major donors, but for the broad base of donors that are supporting you, providing that the really foundational levels of your donor pyramid. How do you communicate with them well, make sure that they understand the impact that their gifts are having, and grow that portion of your donor file to really help give you a sustainable source of revenue, as well as a source of people that will rise up and become those mid and major level donors in the future. So a lot of what I'll talk about today will focus on how do you bring in those people at that donor level through the digital channel, and then how do you communicate with them well and keep them engaged. So I'll talk about what are some of the new things that are coming up in digital, and then specifically with an election year, what are some things that you want to have a particular eye to, or make sure don't get lost. So I will start by giving us...
Hi guys. I found, no, you're getting pointed out, please.
You're sending people to our class? Thank you. Thanks for not stealing her for your own class. I think Ann is in the room next door giving a class at the same time. So I'll just start by giving us a level set of what is the state of fundraising right now, kind of what's been happening in the last couple years. We've had a pretty just a lot of activity in the last couple of years, things that are rocking and rolling. So where are we with fundraising right now? Then talk about what are some tools that we want to be focused on to grow donor connection right now, new things coming up in the digital channel. Talk about some emerging advertising trends in digital. And then lastly, spend a few minutes talking about how nonprofits are using AI, what tools are becoming available, and for you, what might be some considerations when you're evaluating all these things that are coming out. There's just a lot of talk and a lot of things in the digital space kind of grabbing your attention or vying for your attention right now, especially with AI. And I really want to help you think about how do you evaluate what is useful for you, because there's a lot of things that you could do, and then with the layer of the election year, a lot of things that sound like, oh, do we need to try lots of new things? But the reality is you only have so much time, so much staff, and so much budget to invest in trying new things. So we want to be thinking about, okay, what are really the most important things to make sure that you have in place, that you don't lose sight of, and then what may be some worthwhile things to test out or to try and do this year. Starting looking at just what is the state of fundraising right now. This is from the Fundraising Effectiveness Project report. Right now, we have a report from them that goes through the end of calendar 2023. I don't think that the first quarter of 24 is out yet, but hopefully will be soon. So the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, yes.
Is that overall fundraising or is that segmented religious or anything?
This is overall, yeah. And there's a number of databases that participate in this report. So anyone who's on Donor Perfect, I think there are several others that contribute data. So this isn't, the entire nonprofit world, but if you're in one of the participating databases, then your data would be in here. And then you're very simply looking at raw number of donors, $23 to $22, and then donor retention. So they were seeing that the raw number of donors down 3.4%, 2023 to 2022. And that actually, we had a recovery at the end of the year because it was down 7% in just the first 3 quarters. So that down 3% is actually better than it had been earlier in the year. And then dollars at about that same point, down 2.8%. And this is coming after, for a lot of organizations, this decrease started in 2022 after having some of the highest fundraising years they've ever had in 2020, 21, and beginning of 2022. So if your ministry is feeling that right now, that you're seeing that instability in the donor file, or you had seen it dropping off and you're still seeing some dripping, that's not just you, that's what's happening in the industry as a whole right now. And really the issue is retention of, if you dig a level deeper in this report, it's primarily retention of second-year new donors. Donors are, it's been harder to find new donors the last 2 years. We had a lot of missions especially had their best new donor acquisition years in a long time in 2020 and 21, but then 22 and 23 was much harder. Those new donors were more expensive, and then retaining them into the second year that was really a challenge in 23. So one area to be, having in the back of your mind as we talk about digital trends is what will really reach the hearts of those people that are, they're getting to know you. Maybe they've given a first gift, but they're testing you out and needing to learn more why is it important that they keep giving to you. A couple of other trends that we keep a pulse on. These are some metrics that these are from Douglas Shaw & Associates tracking rather than an industry report. We looked at all the rescue missions that we serve, so this is specific to just missions, and looked back at their retention, not just in the last couple of years, but back 20 years. So these charts both go from calendar 2004 through calendar 2023. The top one is looking at the retention for multi-year donors, and that is defined as donors who are giving for at least 3 consecutive years. And then the bottom chart is retention for second year new. So I just mentioned that's kind of the challenging or the problem group right now. People who gave a first-time gift 2 years ago, and then we're trying to get them to give a second gift in the next year so that they can move into this multi-year group. And if you look at the percent of the multi-year retained, that has pretty much stayed between 75 and 80% almost every year for the last 20 years. I think there was maybe 1 year, it's like 2018, where it dipped, it's like right at 75%. There was a big bump in 2020, and then slid back down in 22, but 23 it's bounced back up again. So the issue with retention, it's not so much showing up in that multi-year group. When someone, and this is great news, it's still the case that when a donor has been committed to giving to your ministry, even though there's been all this economic question and turbulence in the last few years, they are not so much the group that's being shaken. It's much more the newer donors. So if you look at, by comparison, that chart, that has been really pretty consistently sliding. It was at 50% second-year new retention in 2004, and down to below 35% in 2023. So there's both an acute problem right now that those second-year new donors are retaining at a lower rate as compared to last year or 2 years ago. But it's really not just an acute problem. This is a trend that we've been seeing for a long, the long 20-year trend. They've generally been retaining at a lower rate. So it's donors having to choose to support fewer organizations, and they're really just having to be more selective about who they support on a long-term basis. So it's addressing this right now is it's both an acute issue that we need to build in some communication strategies for right now, but it also needs to be it's not just a stop the bleeding problem, it's a build up tools in your communication program that are going to sustainably and consistently over the long term welcome new donors in and really make them excited to support your ministry again and again. And then one more trend to take a look at. This, since we're talking about digital, specifically here, I wanted to throw in one example of what's happening with online revenue, or revenue isolated down to the online channel. I'll say there's more variability by ministry type and by what's happening with the individual ministry circumstance. So this chart is just a trend of all revenue through the online channel. This is for an international ministry, so they're going to have some different factors playing in than a rescue mission would. You can see that this starts at 2016. So 2016, 17, 18, 19, super consistent stair-step up growth, and then a big boom in 2020. That's what, by and large, nonprofits were experiencing up through 2020. You could pretty well depend on your online revenue growing, either because you as an organization were beefing up your online communication, improving your program, or because donors were just each year becoming increasingly comfortable giving online. And then 2020, everybody became much more comfortable giving online. But then the last few years, it's really been, the long-term trend is still that the revenue through the online channel is growing, but we're seeing, in some cases, a leveling off. I think 23 was the first year that overall there was that industry-wide, the proportion of income that was given online actually went down a little bit, and that was the first time that had happened. But it was a very small amount. So it's for a lot of ministries, they're just seeing a leveling off. This ministry saw actually a pretty significant contraction in 23 versus 22. But they also, being an international ministry, they have some factors like this organization, I happen to know, doesn't do any work in Israel. So in 23, Israel, any international ministry that does work in Israel, they're doing great this year with their online giving and their overall revenue. This organization is having a harder time because that's not something that they can talk about. That's not part of their work. So we're seeing what we're just seeing is online, we can't depend on the online revenue growing just because, of course, online revenue grows. Now there are these other factors of what's happening in the world, on the news, as well as the donor file, or new donors having pressure, their own budgeting pressures, and having to be increasingly selective about who they're going to continue to give to. And then this year we've got the election. Yeah, Chad, do you have a comment?
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
Do you guys track the percentage of overall, like take missions,
you guys have a sense of the percentage of their donations that are coming from online? Not that you have that number just for missions,
Yeah.
but do you guys have a sense of, if somebody asks you, hey, how much revenue should they be getting online?
Yeah, like what's normal?
Yeah.
You know, I find that it's so different mission to mission. So, I mean, one that I work with, you know, easily 20%, and of their revenue comes online, and that's been, and they don't even have a super robust online presence, but they have presence through other media channels that then people go online to give their gift. So there's kind of that unique situation. Another, you know, I think we think of another case of a mission that they have been pretty aggressive with their online donor acquisition, and they're at 15% of their online revenue.
So 15 to 20 would be a good percentage for missions.
That's, yeah. I would say 20 is definitely on the higher end of what we're seeing right now, but 15 would be, I would say 10 to 15 is pretty reasonable. This organization, as an international ministry, they're at, I think they were at 10 or 11% the last couple of years.
Then I was going to ask John, correct me if I'm wrong, we're about a little over 40%.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm trying to push that up.
Wow, that's awesome.
I was going to ask, would you say that 15 to 20% range is on the general file or including major donor giving? Like those other.
Yeah. That would be overall revenue.
Overall, okay.
Yeah, so that would include major giving, which don't tend to come in online. They would tend to come in as white mail, or as development.
Yeah.
Would you see very different numbers, or?
We don't look at all
Yeah,
the
you're
data,
focused.
so 10 feels low, but we work with a lot of other ministries too, so 15 to 20 sounds about right.
I think, I mean, it has a lot to do too with how the missions donor file has historically been built. So if your file has really been built on direct mail, then I would agree, like this, probably at this point 10% that's on the lower side. 15 would be more normal. But yeah, just a lot of missions, their files have been so built on direct mail, and if they have a team that really embraces digital advertising, then they can build up that portion of online faster. But for some that, they just maybe haven't swung the budget around to be allocated to digital so much, then they'll still be trying to build up from 10% right now. Yeah. Okay. So given that this is kind of where we are, there's been a lot of, there just are a lot of questions coming out of the last few years. The donor file is, I would say, in a period of settling, where we had been seeing a lot of ministries had been in 2022, early 23, had lost a lot of donors that had come on in 2020. But now, while the donor files are still contracting a little bit, they're settling much more. We're kind of out of that period of turbulence in end of 22, beginning of 23. But now we have questions about what should we be doing anything different or special in an election year. So I'll talk about what are just some tools that you should be aware of. We did, as an organization, some research with dozens of ministries that we gave a gift to in fall 2022. So we gave a first-time gift online, and then tracked how did those organizations communicate with our Douglas Shaw and Associates donor. We didn't use the name Douglas Shaw. Our prototypical donor, first-time donor, to see what are organizations using to communicate with those new donors, and where are there opportunities to improve, or where are organizations maybe missing out on communication, so there's a strategic void that could be filled if you're aware of those. Oh, excuse me, actually, before I get to the results from that, I had a few comments to keep in mind regarding election years specifically. So all the things that we'll look at, these principles are in play, but the basic underlying principle is during an election year, you don't want to do anything totally crazy or different. You really want to focus on doing the fundamentals well and communicating in a way that cuts to the donor's heart, because they're going to be hearing so many messages, and there's just going to be so much clutter in both their mailbox, they're on their phone. I've already been getting text messages possibly from candidates. I don't know who they have sent them, but they're going to be getting communication about the election through a lot of channels right up until that first week of November. So the main things that we want to keep in mind are communicating with them in a way that reminds them that your ministry is still there and reminds them how important they are to furthering that. A few principles in your communications: really emphasize your impact. So the problem that the donor is able to solve through your organization, keep that front and center and big and bold. So sharing those life change stories, things that your donor is going to get your newsletter and sit down and just have tears flowing because they're so thrilled that their gift made that difference in someone's life when they read that front page testimony. So emphasizing impact and communicating gratitude to them. Sorry, if it starts to get warm, I'll open it up again. As they're hearing so many messages, you want to be reminding them that, listen, even though it's a chaotic time, you, donor, you can still do something really important through this ministry. So don't despair. Don't forget that you can still have a big impact through giving. Also, don't stop communicating. Sometimes organizations will be concerned that is this not going to be the best investment? We're not maybe getting as high of a return this year as we would have been past year. So should we just pull back so that we're not throwing money out the window because there's so much other stuff going on? And if you stop communicating, we know what will happen. Donors will stop giving. So don't lose heart. Keep out in front of them and keep reminding them that your ministry is important and you need their help. Social media can be very helpful in that. There are good ways that you can target both your donors and new donors or new prospective donors through social media. So really stay abreast of both what's available and ways that social media is changing. I'll talk about that a little bit later, some considerations for this year. One logistical thing to really be aware of is the way that your campaigns are timed. This is something that you may, well, I would say you don't want to do anything big and crazy different in an election year. What you may want to do differently is really be aware of your campaign schedules because sometimes, well, on the print side, the mailboxes are going to be stuffed that last week of October, first week of November. So on the print side, we're looking at should we mail things a little bit earlier so that things aren't, just as the post offices are overwhelmed and as the printers are overwhelmed, making sure that nothing gets delivered too late, just purely because of logistics. On the digital side, you would want to make sure that you have all your campaigns set up earlier so that if the platforms make any changes, I'll talk about the detail of that a little bit later as well, but in the last election cycle, we did see the platforms make some changes in the fall that then we had to scramble to make our campaigns runnable in the lead up, or this was for Thanksgiving, so coinciding with a similar timeline as the election. So thinking about making sure you have your campaign set up early enough that if anything like that does happen, you have some margin, you can make changes. So really be aware of your own campaign dates and how they correspond to what the election advertising is going to be. And then lastly, just be ready to adapt. So this kind of goes along with start earlier, get your campaign set up and ready to go so that if something changes, you can be flexible. Be aware of what some other advertising options might be for the digital channels so that if something isn't working as well as you thought, you are able to pivot and try something else. So just generally be flexible. So nothing that is, again, crazy different, but just having an awareness of the tools that are available to you and really wanting to connect to a donor's heart and communicate with them directly. So now I'll go into some of the things that we saw in our research, and you'll see a lot of these themes are reflected in those findings and recommendations. Okay, we looked first at in the ways that organizations were communicating with donors who came to their website. We looked at how good is the value proposition of the organization as stated on the main donation page. So when someone comes to your website, they click the donate button. At that point, they haven't probably fully made the decision to give yet. So we want to make sure that on that main donation page, there's short but compelling language that makes it easy for them to say, oh, yep, you know what, I do want to complete this donation. So we'll refer to that as the value proposition, the reason that that donor should give to you because they know that their gift is going to make an impact through your ministry. So there are a couple of different levels of value proposition quality. As an example, on the bottom of the screen here, a really minimal value proposition statement would be your gift will transform lives. So it still says your gift is important, but it doesn't really build out what that's going to do or give you a watertight reason for why you should give. Alternatively, a strong value proposition here would be a little more robust. Right now, 1 in 5 people don't have enough to eat. Your tax-deductible gift helps provide food and hope to families, children, and seniors right here in our neighborhood. Together, we can help people in our community during their greatest time of need. Every $10 you donate provides 50 meals. So that tells them exactly what the problem is, who they're going to help, and what it's going to cost to make a difference. So we looked at who had no value proposition, who had a minimal one that would be more like this example on the left side of the screen, and then who had a high quality one. And I'll just highlight the rescue missions here, but we looked at food banks and international ministries as well. So if you're interested in that, you can see the comparison. And for rescue missions, the majority of rescue missions do have what we would say is a high quality value proposition, 59%. 29% still had something, but more on the minimal side. So this would be an area that you could take a look at on your own main donation page and make sure is the language that we're using there clear and robust enough to help a new donor who's coming to us be convinced that they want to make a gift. That may be a very easy opportunity for you to drive more conversions through your main donation page. And in a time, as I said, where it's really important to emphasize your impact, donors will probably be spending a lot of time online this fall doing research, clicking around. So when they come to your website, you want to make it very easy for them to see why they should give a gift to you. Another communication we looked at under this umbrella of communicating impact would be, does the organization, when someone gives a first-time gift, do they send an impact report or an e-newsletter that is telling the donor, it's not just a receipt, not just a thank you, but something that tells them the fuller scope of the ministry, introduces them to how their gift is transforming lives. So this is an area where there's quite a bit of opportunity for more missions to be sending a report like this. this is something that you can put together in an evergreen format. So you can take a testimony of a guest who's come through your program and has a compelling, heart-touching, life-change story. Put that into an e-newsletter that just gets sent to anyone who gives a first-time online gift. You could do a print and a digital version so that they're seen both in both places. But this is a way that you can set up immediate communication of impact to them. So this year, only 32% of rescue missions, or in 23, only 32% of rescue missions doing that. It has improved from 2022, which is 22%. But if your organization doesn't have something like that in place, that's something that you can do as a one-time project, and then set it up to automatically communicate impact to new donors. Another thing that we looked at was sending receipts. And we looked first at just who is even sending an electronic receipt if someone gives an online gift for the first time. You would think minimally you want to send an electronic receipt so that they get that immediate feedback that their gift was received. But actually only 68% of rescue missions were sending an electronic receipt. So if that's not set up in your workflow, that would be a good thing to add. And then we looked at who then goes a step further and actually sends a printed receipt to an online donor.
Are you suggesting send an electronic receipt to a printed donor? You know what I'm saying? The donor that came from the printed stuff.
If they give a gift, if they send you if they mail in a check, should they also get an electronic receipt? Well, in most cases, you probably won't have their email address unless they give it to you with their gift. So I would be generally, I wouldn't worry about getting that set up if they're giving their first gift to you through the mail. In that case, just make sure that they're getting their printed receipt 24 to 48 hours in the mail. This is really for someone who's giving a first-time gift or any gift online. They need to get an emailed receipt to them right away.
It's kind of easy.
Right. Right, it is. It is kind of easy. So then that other 32% of missions should be doing it. But printed receipts, this is an area where we saw a lot of organizations pull back on sending printed receipts to online donors, and you can see in the numbers comparison from 23 compared to 22, in all three sectors, fewer organizations are sending a printed receipt to a donor who's giving an online gift. Many were doing this to cut costs. John, you look surprised.
Oh, no. It dawned on me. Online donors, yes. That's understandable.
Right. So it seems like intuitively, well, we need to cut the budget, and every one of we have to use a first-class stamp with every one of these printed receipts. So let's just stop. The online donors don't need to get them, and that may or may not be true. The thing that was really concerning to us was we saw organizations just make that decision without really looking at data on it. So it may be true that your online donors, most of them will, not interact with you in print. So maybe an email receipt is sufficient for them. But we will often see that printed receipts can make up a large proportion. 10% would not be unreasonable of total revenue to come from printed receipts. So it's, and that would be from all receipts, not from online donors specifically. But printed receipts can make up a large enough proportion